What fallen humanity needs is a priest who truly is able to save from the double curse of sin rather than applying a band-aid solution. We will find him in the heavenly sanctuary. In Hebrews we read, "Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such an high priest, who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, and not man." The earthly sanctuary was carefully modeled after the heavenly and is a teaching model for us. The physical layout and the services conducted in the earthly sanctuary were shadows of the heavenly sanctuary. In Hebrews it tells us that the earthly models serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. "For see, saith he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount." Let us consider what actually happens when the sin is pardoned. It was the guilt that was borne by the sacrificial victim through which they received pardon in the ancient sanctuary services. That was plainly taught in the book of Leviticus, where it repeatedly refers to guilt, saying, "And he shall bring his trespass offering unto the Lord for his sin which he hath sinned." Guilt causes humans to act very strangely at times. Back in the 1930s, there was a 14-year-old farm boy who decided to run away from home one day. He got up early in the morning before sunrise, when everyone was still sleeping, and walked 2 miles to their small farm town. He raided one of the residents' hen house and stole 2 chickens, and put them into a gunny sack which he had brought with him. Early in the morning, when the Chinese restaurant owner began stoking up the fire in his stove at the back of the building, he came with his bag of chickens and sold them to him for $1. That was a lot of money in those days. Then he decided to try hitchhiking to the next town, which was a bigger town, and start his independent life away from the restrictions of home. After walking about 2 miles, he noticed a car approaching from the opposite direction. He hoped it wasn't anyone who might recognize him. As the car came closer, he saw that it was a police car. He was panic-stricken. His first thought was that the police had been informed of the theft of the chickens and was coming to find the thief. He immediately climbed through the barbed wire fence and began running as fast as he could across the open field. The policeman was wondering why this young lad was acting so strangely. He called to him to come back, but that only made him run faster. The policeman decided to give chase and find out what was the problem with the young man. It was a hard chase, but the policeman was gradually able to catch up with him. When the young man saw that the officer was getting close to him, he stopped and turned around and cried out, "I'm not the fella that stole those chickens." Now the officer understood why the young man acted the way that he did. It was a guilty conscience. It is guilt that causes estrangement between the sinner and God, and it is the guilt that has to be removed before communication and healing can take place. Non-Christian religions do not know how to deal with their guilt or become free from it. Some of them engage in penances and self-flagellation. Some may try to modify their guilt by doing good deeds and giving generously to help the poor and needy. In ancient times, the worshippers of Molech even offered their children to appease his wrath and relieve them from guilt. However, does forgiveness end the sinner's responsibility for his sins? That is the big question. This is an important point that most of the Christian world has overlooked. We know from the parable of the 2 debtors of Matthew 18 that the man who had been forgiven 10,000 talents subsequently lost his forgiveness when he refused to forgive the man who owed him 100 pence. Pardon for sin is conditional on continual obedience during probationary time. In Ezekiel we read, "But when the righteous turneth away from his righteousness and committeth iniquity, and doeth according to all the abominations that the wicked man doeth, shall he live? All his righteousness that he hath done shall not be mentioned, in his trespass that he hath trespassed, and in his sin that he hath sinned, in them shall he die." It needs to be understood that when sins are pardoned, they are not blotted out, as many people have thought. The pardoned sinner is encouraged to regard his sins as truly forgiven. But there are many positive statements showing that pardoned sins are not blotted out in actuality until the judgment. The wise men stated, "Who can say, I have made my heart clean, I am pure from my sin?" and the Apostle Paul wrote, "There is none righteous, no, not one." Does that mean that no one had been pardoned for their sins? Not at all. However, the pardoned sins leave a defilement and scar upon the heart and mind, and a blot on the heavenly records. Jeremiah tells us, "The sin of Judah is written with a pen of iron, and with the point of a diamond. It is graven upon the table of their heart, and upon the horns of your altars." Sin affects our relationship with God even though it has been pardoned. Adam and Eve repented for their sin, but they were no longer able to communicate face-to-face with their Creator. They had been pardoned, but they were no longer allowed to remain in the garden they had enjoyed so much. But why? It was because of what sin had permanently done to their spiritual nature. This is an important aspect of sin that is usually ignored or not understood. It is what inspiration calls the knowledge of evil. Sin is like a two-sided coin. On one side is the guilt and condemnation facet. The sense of guilt and condemnation that Adam and Eve felt created an estrangement from God and an aversion to His presence. However, when the sin is pardoned and the guilt removed, the communication between the soul and God is restored, and the healing process can begin. On the other side of the coin is the knowledge of evil facet, the experience in disobedience, which is not removed when sin is pardoned. It took only a moment for Adam and Eve to obtain a knowledge of evil, but they discovered that they would not be free of it all the days of their life. God told Adam he would experience the effect of the knowledge of evil all the days of his life. This is the great lesson to be learned from what happened in the Garden of Eden. Pardon and acceptance is a wonderful truth, but it did not reverse the effects of the fall in Adam and Eve, nor does it reverse the effects of sinning in all who have repented and sought for pardon and acceptance before God. The knowledge of evil will be with the pardoned sinner all the days of his life, or until Christ deals with this serious handicap in the end time. None can truly appreciate the great blessing of having this handicap removed until they understand how adversely the knowledge of evil affects their experience. In our next episode, we will further explore this subject before dealing with Christ's permanent remedy.
You can find the special truths for these end times by visiting https://prophecyalert.org. There you will find links to playlists of past informational videos in this series, as well as new videos and publications as we produce them.